So Juliet, you grew up with a French mom
And dad.
and dad. So both your parents are from
Martinique.
Martinique.
Absolutely.
What is that
They say I'm an
influence?
original French Creole.
You turn that word upside down because you are truly the
I'm an
original.
original French.
What is it like growing up with French parents in Trinidad?
Well, it's an immigrant story.
Yeah.
In a world full of immigrant stories. So they always want better for their kids. So my parents came to Trinidad on boats. Yes, my mother used to sell things on the wharf.
Wow.
Yep, they used to come on weekends and on the little boats that came from Martinique. And then my father's sister got a job at the Normandy Hotel. And then they told them, you should come to Trinidad because it's the land of the future. And they both arrived. My mother used to press people's hair with a coal pot and an actual press, and used to go to people's homes and press people's hair. And then my father used to make furniture. That's how they started. We used to live in Laventille on Trotman Lane in Laventille. We had a furniture factory there. And then they continued to be business people. So I grew up in a house of French immigrant business
That's
people.
so interesting because when we think of migration to Trinidad and Tobago, we think of the motherland. So migrants coming from
Correct.
Africa, India, China, but we don't think
Of
really
people
of people coming from
The Caribbean.
the French West
From the
Indies.
French West
Did they love Trinidad?
Well, my father had just come back from the war, and my mother had one child, my eldest sister, and they basically had nothing. So therefore, coming to Trinidad was the future. They had come from absolutely nothing. There was nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And that's freedom.
Yeah, that is freedom.
So they came to Trinidad.
I want to leapfrog from that story because your mother's influence in starting up
Absolutely.
this amazing space that we're in was just really strong.
Absolutely.
Tell us something about that.
Well, I was at school in Paris. I'd been there for like 7 years. I was working in Germany and different places. I'd gone to baking school in Paris, and she called me and she said, there's this mall that's opening down in West Moorings. I didn't even know where West Moorings was. And I think you should have a spot there. And she says, and I'm going to get you one. And I was like, okay. And she came in and they offered her, as they were offering everybody else who was in food, a spot in what was the food court.
Yeah.
And she insisted at that time that that was not where I belonged and I needed to have a spot entirely of my own.
How did the owners of Westmore even listen to her?
Because she's a lady like that. You do not listen to Madame Petite. Everybody will tell you that. So therefore they listened to her and they gave her this spot.
So right in this spot is where you were originally
Absolutely.
located 37 years ago?
Correct, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes, 37 years ago.
And you were in France at the time?
I was in France at the time.
And when you heard, so you're in culinary school?
I was already working. I was
Yeah.
working at the Hilton in Paris. I was already working.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a story in and of by itself.
Yeah, that's an interesting story, working in a man's world.
So she calls you and tells you about this
I've
spot,
gotten
and
this
your
spot.
response is?
Okay, let's do this, because I mean it was always about opening business, because I come from a business family.
Yeah.
Not that all of my brothers and sisters are in business, but you come from a family of business. It's very different from people who work 9 to 5. Your thinking is different. The way that you move forward is not the same. You make your way.
Yeah.
So it's a different mentality, and I grew up in a house where everybody sort of made their way.
But it's also coming from the world of entrepreneurship, one, but also I think too, having this amazing experience. You talked about working in Paris and in Germany and in Europe, and having this amazing experience in bringing that to here.
At the time, now it's nothing new, but at the
Yeah.
time it was. And a lot of people didn't think that it would succeed, because many people thought that Trinidadians would not embrace the culture of having tea and sitting down and having coffee, and the whole cafe lifestyle was not something that was considered. But it worked.
So entrepreneurship is one thing, but also I think what you were bringing to the table, of course, was this whole wonderful experience you were having in Europe, working in Paris and Germany and all the other places.
What you learn when you live in a culture of food is the way that people embrace food, which is different to what we knew at the time. So it was more of an idea of introducing the concept of the time for food. The pause that food requires, and it was part of the culture that I had grown accustomed to.
In Paris.
In Paris and
Yeah.
in Germany and throughout Europe.
But you've grown accustomed to an idea of, let's say, even a cafe, but it's popular now, but back then, who even thought of having afternoon tea, or perhaps the upper crust did, but you...
But the thing about it is that most people did not necessarily think that it would work. And as the years went by, you had to introduce new things in order to continue to make it relevant.
Yeah.
But I guess we had the blessing of being the first, because there were French bakeries at the time. There was Chez Georges, and people had known about Jacqueline's, because I remember as a child I had grown up with them bringing the
Jacqueline's
things from
is that
Jacqueline's,
old?
of course,
Wow.
from Jacqueline's patisserie to
Yeah.
the house. And there was Chez Georges, whom everybody knew
Yeah.
as well, Georges Loquet, but there was that concept of you being able to purchase it and take it home. So this was the first time, I believe, I could be wrong, that people were going to be able to come in and sit down and experience the whole
Was that
cafe
your
lifestyle.
idea or your mother's idea?
Well, no, it was it had to be a restaurant. It had to have the concept of seating, because otherwise it would just be another food outlet.
Yeah. You have this wonderful talent. You're coming back from Paris and you're setting up this space. But I know, having spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs, that the people who you surround yourself by, the people who are around you, they really contribute to this space. Have you had success stories with your staff and just the talent and the skill set that you needed to keep this going?
Well, you have to have people who are committed to doing work well, and I tell people I can teach anybody to do anything once they're willing to learn.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to teach people to do things the right way. And of course, once you have those who are at the head, who understand the culture and understand the brand,
Yeah.
then it becomes a little bit less complicated.
Yeah.
I'm not saying easy, but a little less complicated. As years have gone by, it becomes increasingly difficult, and everyone in the restaurant industry will tell you that the human resource aspect is the
I
most
think that would be in
difficult part.
every industry.
That's correct.
Juliet,
You know?
in every
That's
industry.
correct.
I think that is the bane of the entrepreneur's
correct.
success or failure.
That's correct. So, but it is something that you are going to have to work with, because customers demand service. They've got so much choice. And I think that we travel a lot. We are people who are people tell you about Nobu, and they go to the finest restaurants in the world, and they go to them and they're accustomed to service. And I think if you get anywhere close to that, then you are delivering something that you're going to try with every day. I tell people, once the door is open, it's like game face on, and it's like you got to show up every day, and you got to do what needs to be done every day.